Hear me? Okay. So thank you for joining this session. Not so many people, so especially thank you for all of you. I am in this presentation. I'd like to talk about the open source practice of LG Electronics. So I am Hyo Jun Im from LG Electronics. So before beginning the presentation, I'd like to briefly introduce the LG Electronics to you. So LG Electronics is the global leader and technology innovator in consumer electronics, mobile communications, and home appliances. So we make products like TV, smartphones, refrigerators, air conditioners, Blu-ray players, network attached storages, and also other devices. So these days we are using Linux in many of these products. For example, for TV, all of the TV products are using Linux. All of the Android smartphones use Linux. And also all of the Blu-ray players, set-top boxes, network attached storages all use Linux. And also some of the models for the air conditioner, refrigerators, they also some models use Linux. So I can say Linux and open source are very important components for our company. So let me start the presentation. So in this presentation, this presentation will cover both the compliance and also engagement from the LG Electronics to the open source community. So I don't think LG Electronics is the world best in working with open source software, but maybe just sharing some experience with you, maybe we can have some insights on how we can go well with the open source software. So let me start the first half of the presentation, open source compliance. So I'd like to talk to you about how LG Electronics built the open source compliance process from scratch. So as I look back on how we built the open source compliance process, there were several steps. So we kickstart the open source compliance and raise the awareness among the developers and management, and set up the process and fill the holes in the process, and also make the open source compliance more efficient. So I'd like to talk one by one for these items. So it is always not easy to start anything. So it is true for the open source compliance. So I stepped into this area in 2005. I had very small teams to work on porting Linux to one of our products. So we were about to release the product, but no one was concerning about the open source compliance, so I was very worried. So I had to some open source compliance works by myself. So, but at the time we didn't have any information, knowledge on open source compliance, and also we didn't have any scanning tools like these days. So it was not easy, and also, so how could we start the open source compliance? So the answer is that we just rushed into it. We didn't have any information, but we just started it. So because we didn't have any scanning tools, so we had to browse the source code directory by directory and define some license terms inside the source code, and we searched the internet to find the obligations for each of the open source license. And our target was to write the bill of material and open source notice in the user's manual. So we copied some terms from the other company's manual, and so we just okay. So we manually did all this job. So I think it was not perfect at the time, but I think it was much better than doing nothing on the open source compliance. So by doing this, we could get some basic knowledge on popular open source licenses. Also, we could get some knowledge on practical issues as we work on the open source compliance. For example, for GPL licensed software, we have to include the license terms into the user manual. So in that case, we found that it's almost 2 or 3 pages of user manual if we include all the license terms into user manual. So usually it increases the material cost. So we found out that we have to discuss with the product teams on these issues early in the product. If we talk about these issues in in later, then it can be a problem. So we could get some practical knowledge on these kind of issues as we work on open source compliance. So I think as we work on the compliance, open source compliance, it is important to have a willingness to comply with the open source. So there are many small companies around the world, and it is not easy for them to buy some commercial scanning tools or have some resource work on this kind of works. But I think they can also manage to comply with the open source if they have some willingness in their limited resource. So I think the willingness to comply with the open source is important. So in 2006, many of the products inside LG Electronics started using Linux. So there are so many products. So I could not just, my team could not just deal with all the products with the open source compliance. So we had to, the product teams to deal with the problem. So we had to raise awareness among developers and management. So there are several ways to raise awareness. So we introduced some relevant industry loss cases to developers and management, and also we had some training. Sometimes we escalate the open source compliance issue to the management, and also sometimes we got help from outside experts. So at the time we had some good relationship with one professor in the university in Korea, and he was the expert in this area. So we invited him to my company and arranged a meeting with management. And I remember that the meeting was the turning point for us to start the open source compliance. So sometimes it is very good to get help from outside experts. So these were some cases we communicate with management and also development teams. So the first one case is the D-Link case. In this case, the D-Link was prohibited from selling their products because they did not comply with the open source. So for manufacturing companies, it is very critical if we cannot sell our products into the market. So this was very effective to raise awareness among developers. And the second case is the Skype. So Skype did not produce any IP phone, but they just distributed the IP phone, but they were sued. So this case shows that maybe distributors can also have lawsuit filed against them. So the Verizon case is also the similar one. And 2009, several companies have been sued from Software Freedom Law Center on using BGBox and does not disclose the source code for BGBox. So one of the company was Westinghouse, and it was forced to give their TVs to charity organizations and as well as pay a penalty. So there are a lot of industry cases also, but these were some effective ways to communicate. So of course the most efficient way to raise awareness is by training. So in my company we have regular offline training. So whenever new employee comes to Korea, there's the open source license training course in the official training course for new employees. So every software developers can have a chance to get some knowledge on open source compliance issues. And but it is not easy to bring all the people into the same place and give a training in the same time. So sometimes it is more efficient to have online training. So, but the problem is that the developers and management, they are very busy. So it is not easy to push them to listen to the online training course. So we had to make the training course very interesting. So the right side, this is some screenshots from our training course. So in that time, the movie Da Vinci Code was very famous at the time. So we got some ideas from the movie. So at the first of the content, the employee is found dead in his office with some mysterious blood marks around him. And as we try to find out some secrets behind the blood mark, we can learn some basic knowledge on open source license and also some other issues. So it is important to make the online content very interesting. And also we have some small version of the open source license course. So this is for the non-developers, so it's very short and they can easily access learn some basic knowledge on open source compliance. So with the awareness among the developers and management, we would be able to start to set up the process. So we introduced the verification tool to automatically scan the source code and identify the open source inside the product. And also we got the open source compliance process into the official product development process so that no organization will miss the, yeah?
Is the verification tool something you wrote in-house or is it?
No, it's commercial. Yeah. It was a black duck tool. Okay. Yeah. So we got the open source compliance process into the product development process. And also we had some legal people to be engaged in this process. And also we made some corporate-wide standard rules and processes. And we started monitoring all the organization. And also we had some training to the people involved in open source compliance. So we are doing some workshops inside my company between the people involved in open source compliance. So all of the people get together in one place and they have some training and also have some discussion, the corporate-wide. So we have this kind of events 2 times a year. And also we are publishing monthly newsletters inside my company. So this newsletter includes some industry news on open source compliance and also some status inside company. So this is also a very effective way to raise awareness. And also we made some guideline documents on the open source license and also enterprise level open source compliance process. We made some official document on that. So, but we tried hard to set up the open source process, but nothing can be perfect. So as we work on the open source compliance process, we had a lot of issues. So the first one was the third-party software. So our product also includes some third-party software. So in the case, some third-party software say that we didn't use any open source inside our software, but later on we find out that their software had some GPL modules, so it could be a problem. So later we had to enhance our process to include third-party software. Also, it's the same with the OEM, ODM products. The ODM products also, we have to monitor those companies. And sometimes complying with the open source conflict with business. For example, one might have some implementation of industry standards, which is limited to some member companies of any industry forum. But later, we made a product and we find out that it contains some LGPL software inside the product. So we have to disclose some source code, but this source code is implementing the industry standard. So if we disclose the source code, then we cannot do the business anymore because we cannot work with the industry forum. So those kind of issues can arise as we work with open source compliance. So I think the issues with open source compliance is not just in the by being sued by some community or some people, but also it can harm the corporate-wide business. So that is why complying with open source compliance is important. So, and also we find out that actually we have been focusing on Linux-based products, but we find out that some of the non-Linux products also have some issues. They use open source, so we had to try out to monitor also non-Linux products also. And sometimes we find out that some organizations are out of the process. So especially when there are some organizational changes inside the company. So I think the open source compliance managers should keep eye on the organization changes also. And so there are a lot of issues. They cannot be perfect. So there will be also some issues. So I think the important thing is that there should be just one focal point for in charge of open source compliance. If we have two people or parties working in open source compliance, then there can be some blind spots. No one cares the blind spots. So I think it is important to have just one party in charge of the open source compliance, not two or three, just one. And so it's important to comply with the open source, but also it's important to do it efficiently with low price. So we are trying to make the open source compliance efficient. So the first one is to develop the distribution side. So at first we distributed our source code using email. So when users send an email and request the source code, then we sent an email to customers. So it worked for several years. But when we released some Android phones, the source requests increased very quickly. So we could not deal with all the requests. One day we had about 100 requests one day. So we could not deal with all the open source requests using email. So we had to develop the distribution side. So usually the number of open source requests increase exponentially, not linearly. So I think we'd better prepare earlier than we expect. And because the developing distribution side usually takes several months, so we should prepare earlier. And also there are many hands-on jobs as we work on open source compliance. So if we can automate some of those hands-on jobs, we can make the open source compliance more efficient. And also it's important to accumulate the assets as we have been working on open source compliance, some knowledges, some claim cases. So it is important to accumulate those knowledges into database. So this is the distribution site of my company, opensource.lg.com. So customers can access this site and download some source code and also some open source notice. And so it also provides some statistics concerning open source distribution. And also it should provide some features that the developers can upload their source code into this site. So usually it takes several months. And this is the internal information site about the open source license. So we have some basic knowledge on open source license, compliance, and some guidelines, some documents on processes, and also some tips on Android, and also some external resources. So having this kind of internal site is good for the efficient open source compliance. So this is the Linux Foundation's recommended compliance process. So you can find out this information in the Linux Foundation homepage. So there are many papers in Linux Foundation homepage. So it will be very helpful for you. So based on this recommended process, we have set up this process inside my company. This is the open source compliance process of my company. So we have one commonly used corporate-wide process, but each business unit, they also have some their own situations. So business units sometimes customize this process for their specific needs. So the first phase is the identification. So we identify what kind of open source is used in the product at the very early stage of the product. And we also get some open source checklist from third-party software vendors. So this is the identification phase. And then we have some review and resolve issues. So we run the automatic scanning tools and try to find out that actually what kind of open source has been included in the product. And if there are some issues, then we have to resolve those issues. And also we get some list of open source used in the third-party software. So we review and resolve issues. And then there's the approval phase. So in this phase, based on the analysis report made in the review and resolve issues, we make the open source notice or notice information. And the last phase is verification and distribution. So we get the source code from the development teams and upload those source code into distribution site and start distributing the open source to customers. So we have been running this process, but still we have some issues. So there are many issues, but if I introduce some of the issues, the first one is the ambiguity in license. For example, there are a lot of concepts like the linking, static linking, dynamic linking modules in open source license, but sometimes it's not very clear what is the definition of module or static linking, dynamic linking. For example, if you are working with the script language, then what is linking? What is the concept of linking? So sometimes there are this kind of ambiguity in license itself, but also some practical issues. So in that case, I think the best way is to contact the original author of the open source software. The intention of the author is more important than the license term itself. So if we contact the author of the software, sometimes we get some answers. So another one example of issue is the error. There is some errors in the original open source software. For example, we had one MPL-based open source in our product, and as we scan the open source software, we find out that there are two files, LGPL files. So it means that we have to disclose all the source code inside MPL source code. So it's very weird. So we also contact the author of this open source software, and they say, oh, it's our mistake. So they also contact the original author of two LGPL files, and they got excuse from them, and they relicensed the two LGPL files as MPL. So we resolved this issue. So I think it is important to have a direct communication with customers, and community is very important. So sometimes the customers, when they ask some requests to us, maybe we cannot give the answer right at the time. But if you are willing to comply with the open source and give some quick reaction, then usually they can be patient. So if they ask some requests, then it's important to give a quick reaction, even if we don't have solution yet. And also, sometimes it's wise to directly communicate with community if we have some issues. So I think the direct communication with customers or community is important. And also, actually, last year, Professor Evan Moglen visited Korea and had some presentation, and someone asked him, how can we avoid the open source lawsuit? And his answer was that just answer the phone. So when someone, because the corporations sometimes ignore their questions because they don't know how to react to them, but it's important to answer the phone and give active communication with the customers and community. So that's it. That's all of about the open source compliance. And also the last half of the presentation will cover the open source engagement. So how LG Electronics is engaged in the open source development. So there are several steps to engage into the open source. So we can encourage engineers and also get consensus from management and also deal with the fragmentation. So we start to encourage engineers to participate in the open source development. So we had to motivate them. So we had some logics like this. So the first one was that if engineers can participate in the open source development, then they can learn a lot from kernel experts worldwide, because the open source experts will have a review and valuable feedback. So by getting feedbacks and applying them, they can learn a lot on the open source. Also, the important point is that the individuals, not companies, are appreciated from the community. So if we submit any patch into the open source community, then they appreciate the individuals, not company. So it will be it will remain forever as the open source remains. So it can be a good motivation for engineers. Also, sometimes the engineers develop any feature, and if he keeps those features inside the company, then when the new version of open source comes in, then he has to put his feature again. And also, if there's some new hardware board, then also he has to put it again. So he gets some burden on maintaining the features he developed. So in this case, if you upstream those codes into the mainline, then he doesn't have to get the burden of maintaining those features. So this was some logic to encourage engineers to participate in the open source development. And also in my organization, we have some events to encourage engineers. So every month we have some get-together event, and we award some open source contributors. If he contributed to any open source project in his first time, then we give the open source newbie award, and with some coupons, some prizes. So this kind of events also can encourage the atmosphere of working with open source community. And it is important to getting consensus from management. So it is not easy. Actually, getting consensus on open source compliance is not easy, but for open source engagement, it's much more difficult. So I'd like to share some experience on this. So usually when I talk with management, the first step is usually to highlight the long-term benefits and some good citizenship in the open source community, those kind of attitude. But usually the management, they are not so much interested in that. Actually, they are very much interested in the short-term benefits and practical benefits. So I think it's the wise approach to highlight the short-term and practical benefits. So these are some logics that why we have to actively participate in the open source community. So the first one is that we can build the capability for essential open source software. So for LG Electronics, for TV products, the open source is about 70% of all the product software, and for Android phones, 80%. Network attached storages, more than 90% of open source software. So it's such an important component for our product. But so that we can build the capability, we have to actively participate in the open source software. Also, we can reduce the maintenance cost if we upstream our features into the mainline source code. Then, as the new version comes in, we don't have to put every feature into the open source. So we can reduce the maintenance maintenance cost, and also we can easily catch up with the latest version of the open source. And also the worldwide experts have some reviews on the patches we gave to the community, so it can improve the software quality. Usually management are very sensitive to software quality, so this kind of logic can be very effective to communicate with management. And also, when we persuade management, it's very wise to talk with the specific numbers and also some cases. So it is a good way. So also, we can get some help from outside experts, like the open source compliance case. So actually, we also the management usually doesn't believe what I say, but do believe what the outside experts say. So this is the one good approach. So as we work with the open source, we have some fragmentation issues. So there are several reasons we have fragmentation. So the first one is that there are different sources for original open source. For example, Android kernel, usually we get the kernels from chipset vendors, but sometimes from Google and sometimes just from the open source community. So the fragmentation in the original open source, and also sometimes the individual developers get the open source individually and do their own customization. So in the case, there can be fragmentation. And also several organizations, each organizations make their own products. So in the case, also the fragmentation can be so. So it's important to deal with the fragmentation, but I think there is no magic bullet. So one of the ways to reduce the fragmentation is the active information sharing among developers. So one developer communicate with another developer, and they say, "Oh, you have been working on this same open source with me. Then we can consolidate this effort into one." So those kind of active information sharing is important. And also sometimes it's not easy to maintain whole source tree into the same product lines. So in the case, maybe it is much wiser to maintain list of patches rather than whole tree. That can be one way of dealing with the fragmentation. And also we can maintain internal open source repository so every developers use those repository to work with one specific open source software, open source project. But I think the best way to deal with the fragmentation is upstreaming. So this is the Android case with the fragmentation case. So actually, when we develop any Android product, usually we get kernels from chipset vendors, and also sometimes Google release their own kernels. So we have to get some features from them and apply to our product. And also, if the kernel.org release new version of kernel, then we also have to get some features. And we have base models, and based on the model, we also develop some derived models. So as we work on, also some inputs come. So this is the big issue in the across industry. So currently, Linux Foundation is leading the initiative called LTSI, which means the Long-Term Support Initiative or Long-Term Support Industry, to reduce the fragmentation. So they pick some specific kernel versions, and they will be maintaining those specific kernel versions for a long time, maybe 2 years, and also put some features from industry into those kernel versions. So they are maintaining LTSI kernel. This is the industry effort to reduce the fragmentation. And also you can maintain the internal open source repository. So if the one organization is making a product A, So if they develop any features, then they apply it to the product, and then they merge into the central open source repository. And also product B, they also merge their features. So these features will be the candidate for the upstreaming later. So we can make some cleanups on these candidate patches and submit to open source project. And in this slide, I'd like to show you one case in my company that we had some benefit by working with open source community. So when we were developing one TV model, we had some problems. We had some kernel panic on sudden detach of USB storage device from TV. So we analyzed the cause of the problem, and we found out that it's caused by the race condition in Scotch subsystem. So we developed a simple patch and applied the patch into the product, and we fixed the problem. So usually the development phase ends here, but the engineer submit the patches into Linux kernel mailing list. We applied into the product and submit the patch. And then some developers further develop the patch. So for example, Batfan, Ashi developed this patch into a long patch set with 9 patches, and also Zhuangjin Khan of Intel fixed some potential problems with the patch. So it evolved into the better patch for this problem. So several months passed, and later on, we found that another kernel panic on screen sudden detach of USB device, even if we applied this patch. So we applied the community patch, which was developed by community, and we fixed the problem very easily. So if we haven't submitted this patch into the community, then there would not have been any community patch. So then we had to fix this problem by ourselves, which may take 2 or 3 weeks. So I think it is a good example. The working with community can improve the quality of the product and also benefit the time to market. So this is the current status of LG's contribution to Linux kernel. So LG Electronics is contributing to Linux kernel since 2012. Actually, before the time, we contribute to Linux virtually zero. But from 2012, we are doing some contribution to Linux kernel. So, for example, for 3.5 kernels, we had 52 patches merged into mainline, and for 3.7, 98 patches. And so the numbers are not very not high, but it's less than 1%. But the good sign for our contribution is that our contribution is mainly focused on the core kernel. So there can be some debates on the definition of core kernel, but if we restrict the core kernel into kernel, tools, fs, then you can see that most of our contributions are focused on core kernel. So for example, for 3.7, we had 97 patches contributed to Linux kernel, which is about more than 5% of core kernel patches worldwide. So currently we are doing on these areas, like for memory management, we are doing developing some volatile range patches on and per process reclaim, some slop, GRAM improvement, and also for perf tools, we are developing some features like perf trace, event group view, ftrace integration. So we will keep working on open source community. We are trying hard to work with open source community, but we also have some issues. So the first one is the time difference. So actually, when you submit the patch, then if someone gives some review, then we have to give some quick feedback. If we don't give feedback very quickly, then sometimes they forget about that. So the chance of the patches to be merged into mainline it becomes low. So actually the developers have some stress when they are sleeping. Oh, I have to reply to this mail, so I cannot sleep very well. So time difference is one of the issues. And also we have some issues with the language barrier. Usually the Korean people are not so very fluent in English, so it is not easy to efficiently communicate with the community. And also there are some conflicts with the time to market. We have some schedule for the product, so it's not easy to also work with the community. And also we need some alignment with business as we work on contribution. And also currently most of the community people are from server side, so sometimes we have to appeal some embedded specific issues to the community, but in combined with the language barrier, it's not easy to appeal those features. So I think these are some issues as we work on Linux. So this is all of my presentation. So I'd like to thank the kernel community for making such a great OS and enabling us to make innovative products, and also for reviewing patches and giving us valuable feedbacks, and for steadily maintaining kernel with high quality. And also I'd like to thank Linux Foundation for the effort to protect Linux and grow Linux, and for holding various events like this for kernel developers, and for giving us insight on the value of open source. So that's it, my presentation. So do you have any questions?
How many people at LG manage this open source effort? You said you had
Actually, the product team developers are also participating in the open source, but there are some full-time engineers inside my company fully working on contributions. So maybe 4 or 5 people, they are full-time working on contribution. They do not other jobs. Their mission is to contribute to Linux. So yeah. So actually, we are doing this kind of activity with the consensus with the management, not just the bottom-up approach, but we get some consensus on with the management. So management allowed that also thinks that this kind of activity is very important for our company. So any other questions? Okay.
Sure. This will be really specific. So about a year ago, I bought an LG Smart TV.
Okay.
And I noticed there was an offer for disclosure of the source code in it, but I had to request the source code within 1 year.
Okay.
And of course, the GPL version 2 requires that I have at least 3 years to request the source code. Do you know who decided on this 1-year turnaround policy, and are they aware that it conflicts with the terms of the GPL?
1 year turnaround policy?
Right. Like, for instance, I have 1 year from the date of purchase of the product to request open source from LG, or apparently you guys don't have to honor the request.
As far as I know, our policy is not, we will provide open source for any products.
Okay.
So maybe some miscommunications. So please let me know.
Well, I mean, it was in the manual. It came with the product.
So I don't know. I will check.
Yeah.
Please let me know the specific model number, then I will check out.
Well, it could be that this is like a problem that was resolved 2 years ago, but it took
Yeah.
so long to propagate through.
Yeah, maybe.
Product line.
So we are evolving the open source process, so maybe there have some problems. Okay.
So
Please let me know, then I will
Okay.
check. Yeah.
Be happy to.
Okay. Thank you.